Imagine you are lying perfectly still inside a humming clinical tube. You're in a brain scanner, a multi-million-pound piece of engineering designed to map the geography of your mind. From the outside, the researcher sees a flickering screen of neon greens and electric blues. They see blood flow, they see electrical spikes, they see the precise neural correlation of a memory being triggered. To the scientist, you're a dataset, a series of coordinates, a biological machine processing input. But from the inside, you are experiencing something entirely different. Maybe you're under the influence of a heavy dose of psilocybin. Maybe you're deep in a meditative trance, or maybe you're simply remembering the exact crushing weight of a grief you thought you'd buried. Inside, there's no data. There are no coordinates. There's only the felt quality of the moment, the blinding intensity of a colour that doesn't exist in nature, the strange dissolution of the boundary between your skin and the air, the sudden, shimmering awareness that you are, for some reason, actually here. For a long time, I believed that the gap between these two perspectives was just a technical problem. I thought if we just built a better scanner, if we just mapped every single synapse and tracked every single neurotransmitter, the mystery would evaporate. I thought the inside was just a fuzzy, imprecise way of describing the outside. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because there's a difference between describing how a machine works and explaining why it feels like something to be that machine. The psychonaut is the one who travels. They push the boundaries, they explore the altered states. They map the strange rooms of consciousness to see how far the trip can go. But there's another kind of explorer. A philosopher who doesn't care where the trip goes, but asks why there's a traveller in the first place. His name is David Chalmers, and he is the man who forced modern philosophy to face the hard problem. The psychonaut asks, how far can consciousness go? Chalmers asks, why is there consciousness at all? In this episode, we are entering the gap between the scan and the experience. And there's a bit of talk about scanners today, as I kept thinking about the book A Scanner Darkly and that little monologue towards the middle of it, I think. And it's where the character Bob Arctor talks about the scanners seeing into him. What does a scanner see, he asked himself. I mean, really see. Into the head, down into the heart. Does it see into me, into us, clearly or darkly? I hope it does, he thought, see clearly. Because I can't any longer these days see into myself. I see only murk. Murk outside, murk inside. I hope for everyone's sake the scanners do better. Because, he thought, if the scanner sees only darkly the way I myself do, then we are cursed again, and like we have been continually, and we'll wind up dead this way, knowing very little, and getting that little fragment wrong too. 835. We tend to think of the mystery of consciousness as something that happens in the margins. We associate it with the edges of experience, the deep retreats, the chemical breakthroughs, the moments when the ego dissolves and we suddenly see the architecture of the universe. We imagine it as a special event, this rare alignment, a doorway that only opens when we're pushed to the absolute limit of our normal functioning. But that is a mistake. The mystery isn't waiting for us at the end of a trip. It is present in the most mundane, unremarkable moments. Take a moment to look around you, right now. Maybe there's a red mug on your desk. Maybe you can hear the low, steady hum of a refrigerator in the next room. Maybe you feel the slight, persistent irritation of a phone buzzing in your pocket, or the warmth of a single patch of sunlight hitting your hand. These are not special experiences. They are the baseline. They are the white noise of being alive. But if you stop and actually look at them, you realize that these ordinary moments are where reality begins. We can explain almost everything about that red mug from the outside. We can talk about the wavelength of light hitting your retina, the photons triggering electrical signals in the optic nerve, and those signals being routed to the visual cortex. Your brain categorizes the object as mug and the color as red. We can map the entire chain of events. We can build a model of the process. We can even predict with quite scary accuracy how you'll behave in response to that mug. We know if you'll reach for it, if you'll knock it over, or if you'll simply ignore it. But none of that explains the redness of the red. See, the scientists can tell you everything about the wavelength, the neurons, and the report, but they can't tell you why it feels like something to see red. They can describe the mechanism of the experience, but they can't describe the experience itself. There's a difference between the physics of the signal and the quality of the sensation. This is the line that David Chalmers drew in the sand. He suggested that we have been confusing two entirely different types of problems. He called them the easy problems and the hard problem. Now, when Chalmers says easy, he doesn't mean that they're simple. It doesn't mean you can solve them over a weekend with a bit of effort. He means they are easy in the sense that they are functional. They are about how the brain performs a task. The easy problems are the ones we're good at solving. We can explain how the brain integrates information, how we focus attention, how we discriminate between two different sounds, or how we report our internal states to other people. These are problems of mechanism. They are questions of how does this work. If you can describe the physical process that produces the behavior, you've solved the easy problem. But then there's the hard problem. The hard problem isn't about how the brain processes information. It's about why that processing is accompanied by an inner life. Why does it feel like something to be you? Why does the sound of a kettle boiling have a specific inner texture? Why does the sting of a memory feel like a physical ache in the chest? Why is there a world appearing to someone rather than just a silent, dark machine processing data in a void? Now let's take a moment to think about that. Imagine that you're a very smart person from the future. You have a map of every single atom in the human brain. You can see the neurotransmitters leaping across synapses, the electrical pulses racing through the axon, the chemical cascades flooding the hippocampus. You can see the entire machinery of a human being in a state of profound joy. You can see the exact coordinates of the dopamine, the specific firing patterns of the reward circuitry, the mechanical architecture of a smile. But as you look at the map, you realize something is missing. You can see the how of the joy, but you cannot see the joy itself. You can see the machinery that produces the feeling, but you can't find the feeling in the machinery. No matter how high the resolution of your map, the felt quality of the experience is nowhere to be found. It isn't a piece of tissue, it isn't a specific frequency of electrical activity. It is something else entirely. If we explained every single mechanism in the brain, we'd still be left with a gaping hole in our understanding. We'd have a perfect map of the machinery, but we'd still be asking why the lights are on. If you're a physicalist, if you believe that everything in the universe is just matter in motion, then the hard problem is a bit of a nightmare, because it suggests that the complete physical description of the world might leave out the most important thing about the world, the fact that it's being experienced. It is the difference between a description of pain and the feeling of pain. You can read a medical textbook on the neurology of a migraine. You can learn about the dilation of blood vessels in the brain, the activation of the trigeminal nerve, and the release of CGRP. I love acronyms. You can become an expert in the easy problem of pain. But if you've never had a migraine, that textbook is useless. It gives you the map, but it doesn't give you the territory. The what it is like is the territory. And the thing that should unsettle you about this is that it is the only thing we actually know for certain. You might be wrong about the physics of the brain, you might be wrong about the wavelengths of the light, but you can't be wrong about the fact that right now, in this moment, you are experiencing something. Now, Chalmers isn't suggesting that science is useless by any stretch. That scanner has given us extraordinary things. He's suggesting that science, as we currently understand it, is fundamentally blind to the first-person perspective. We've spent centuries perfecting the map of the machinery while completely ignoring the fact that there's someone inside the machine watching the lights flicker. If the physical processes of the brain are sufficient to explain everything we do, like how we talk, how we move, how we react, then why do we need consciousness at all? What is the point of the inside if the outside can do the job just fine? Right, it's story time, people. Get comfortable. You know I love a good story. This is a fictitious story, I'm just using it for dramatic effect. There's a woman in a clinic in London. She's been given a precise dose of psilocybin dissolved in a small glass of water. She lies down on a couch, puts on an eye mask and a pair of headphones, and waits. Within 20 minutes, the room begins to dissolve. The boundary between her skin and the air becomes a suggestion rather than a fact. She's not tripping, she's watching the machinery of her own identity come apart bolt by bolt in real time. Consciousness is not a fixed state, it has depth, and there are rooms inside it that most of us never visit unless someone gives us the key. There's a special kind of explorer for this. We call them the psychonaut. Now let's be clear about what a psychonaut is, and more importantly what they are not, because we've talked about psychonauts quite a lot in the past season, and I realise we haven't gone into much depth about what it actually means. Now psychonauts aren't necessarily mystics or gurus or people telling you a shortcut to enlightenment. They are certainly not some enlightened explorers who have unlocked a secret level of reality. To call someone a psychonaut is simply to say that they explore altered states of consciousness. The method is secondary. I mean, it could be a hit of psilocybin or DMT, or 20 years of silent meditation in a cave in the Himalayas. It could be the crushing silence of a sensory deprivation tank, the rhythmic intensity of a holotropic breathwork, or the vivid, generated architecture of a lucid dream. The method doesn't matter. What matters is the position. The psychonaut is someone who enters the machinery from the inside. While our researchers are standing at the control panel watching the brain scanner and noting the neural correlations, the psychonaut is the one actually lying in the tube. They observe the dissolving ego. They notice the boundary between me and the room becoming a suggestion rather than a fact. Now there's a pervasive, almost desperate tendency to romanticize these states. We treat the psychedelic experience as a form of automatic wisdom, and we assume that because an experience was intense, it must be true. We mistake the sheer scale of the vision for the depth of the insight. Now let's not do that today. There's no time for bullshit. We can have a profound experience and interpret it absolutely wrong. You can mistake psychological baggage for metaphysical revelation. You can come back from a trip with a level of insight that feels world-changing, only to realize 3 days later that you were simply hallucinating a very complex set of geometric patterns while feeling an intense emotion that you couldn't name. Intensity is not truth. A feeling of oneness is a biological event, not necessarily a cosmological proof. And yet, even if we strip away the mysticism, the psychonaut remains an essential witness. Not because they have the answers, but because they reveal the staggering flexibility of the human mind. When you watch a psychonaut, you see that the eye is not a solid object. It is a process. It is a narrative that can be loosened, stretched, or completely dismantled. Think about the meditator. After years of practice, they reach a state where thoughts are no longer me. They are simply objects passing through a field of awareness. The I doesn't disappear, but it moves. It shifts from being the actor in the drama to being the witness of the drama. They are not getting rid of the self, they are observing the machinery of the self in real time. Or consider the lucid dreamer. They are inside a world that they know is generated. They're walking through a city that doesn't exist, talking to people who are projections of their own subconscious, and yet the experience is still experienced. The physics are fake, the geography is imaginary, the inhabitants are phantoms. But the what it is like is absolutely real. In a sensory deprivation tank, the outer world is deleted. The light's gone, the sound's gone, the touch of the air is gone. But awareness doesn't vanish. Instead, it turns inward. It begins to amplify the smallest internal signals until the silence becomes a roar. And this is where the inside reveals its most disturbing property, its autonomy. When you're in that tank or in the grip of a profound psychedelic peak, you start to notice that the you who's observing the experience is not the same you who walked through the front door. There's a secondary witness that emerges, a part of you that stands back and watches the dissolution of your own identity with a strange, detached curiosity. You might see your childhood memories as if they're cinema screens playing in a row. You might feel your sense of time collapse, where a single second of a shimmering colour contains the entire history of the world, and 10 years of your professional life feels like a brief, faded footnote. In these moments, the psychonaut isn't just exploring a different state. They are discovering that the self is a fragile, optional piece of software. This is a dizzying realization, Because if the I can be switched off or shifted or dissolved without the world disappearing, then the I is not the source of the experience. It is just one of the things being experienced. The I isn't the screen, it's just another image flickering on it. This is the freedom of the psychonaut. They discover that the machinery of the ego is not the point. The point is the light that allows the ego to appear in the first place. They find themselves standing in the center of a vast, silent awareness that doesn't need a name, a job title, or a history to exist. It is the ultimate inside experience, a state where the only thing left is the raw, unadulterated fact of existence. No story, no narrative, just the pure, humming presence of being. The psychonaut shows us that consciousness is a shapeshifter. It can expand until it encompasses the entire room. It can contract until it's a single piercing point of focus. It can stretch time into an eternity or compress a lifetime into a second. But changing the contents of the landscape does not explain why there is a landscape at all. A trip can alter the colors, it can shift the geometry, can dissolve the ego and replace it with a feeling of cosmic unity, but it doesn't answer the hard problem. Changing the type of experience you're having doesn't explain why you're having an experience in the first place. The psychonaut is like a tourist who's traveled to every corner of a strange, iridescent country. They can tell you about the mountains, the cities, the weather, and the strange customs of the locals. They can give you a detailed map of the terrain. But Chalmers isn't asking about the terrain. He's asking why there's a country. He's asking why there's a traveller, a journey, and a felt world to travel through. The psychonaut isn't just showing us a different state. They're showing us the volatility of the inside. They prove that the interior world is far more vast and volatile than the outside suggests. But in doing so, they only make the hard problem more pressing. Because if the inside can be this flexible, this strange and this intense, then the gap between the scanner and the experience becomes a canyon. If a few milligrams of a molecule can turn a grey office into a cathedral of light, then we have to ask what exactly is the light that the molecule is switching on? Is it just a chemical glitch in the hardware? Or is this molecule merely a key that unlocks a door to a property of reality that the scanner is fundamentally unable to see? Now, the psychonaut doesn't give us any answers, but they do give us some evidence. They are the witness to the fact that the inside exists and that it's an ocean of complexity that no amount of neural mapping can fully capture. They show us that we are not just biological machines processing data. We are the place where that data becomes a feeling. The psychonaut may travel through every room in the house, but Chalmers is the guy standing outside asking why there's a house at all. Close your eyes and imagine the ultimate map. A little bit of audience engagement today. I'm hoping, now that I've got the windows open today because it is stonking hot in the United Kingdom, we're getting up to like mid-30s apparently today. So you may well be listening whilst you close your eyes and imagine that ultimate map, the sound of the birds who are having a good old sing outside my window. So I do apologise for bird disruption this episode, but just go with it. Think of it as soothing background noise whilst I explain some of this to you. So we've closed our eyes. We're imagining the ultimate map. I've come back from my tangent. Now, this is not a map of a city or a coastline. We are thinking of a map of a human being. A map so precise, so exhaustive, that it captures every single atom, every drifting chemical in the brain. From the outside, the map is a masterpiece of third-person data. It shows neural networks firing in a sequence that we can predict. It tracks blood flow shifting in the prefrontal cortex. It logs the exact millisecond a signal leaves the thalamus. Now, if you're any sort of researcher, this map is super important. It's the holy grail, a complete account of the physical system. But you can have the most perfect map in the universe, and you still have no idea if anyone's home. You can see the map of a man experiencing a first kiss. You can see the surge of oxytocin, the spike in dopamine, the rhythmic acceleration of the heart. You can see the entire mechanical chain of what we call a romantic experience. But the map doesn't show the romance. It doesn't show the warmth, the sudden breathlessness, the terrifying fragility of the moment. It shows the plumbing, but it doesn't show the water. David Chalmers wants us to gaze into this gap, into this distance, and to make it hurt, he gives us a thought experiment. He asks us to imagine a zombie. Now, I'm not talking George Romero and the horror movies and the malls. I'm not talking about the shambling corpses of the Walking Dead with a hunger for brains. This is a philosophical zombie. Now imagine a being that is physically and behaviourally identical to you in every possible way. The zombie looks like you, it talks like you, it holds the same boring conversations in the break room about the flickering fluorescent light or the quality of the vending machine coffee. If you poke it with a pin, it flinches. If you tell it a joke, it laughs. If you ask it if it feels joy or grief, it says yes, and it describes those feelings with the same precision and nuance that you do. It might even say, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed today, I think I need a walk. And it would say it with the exact right amount of sigh in the voice, the exact right tilt of the head. It'll be a better conversationalist than most people you meet at a dinner party, and it would feel absolutely nothing while it was doing it. To every external observer, the zombie is indistinguishable from a human being. The brain scanner would show the same patterns, the blood flow would be the same, the synapses would fire in the same sequence, but inside, there's nothing. There's no inner light, no felt experience, no what it is like. The zombie is a perfect piece of machinery. It's a biological computer that's mastered the art of mimicking a conscious being. It processes the data, it produces the response, but there's nobody in the room. The lights are on, but the house is empty. Now, if such a being is logically possible, if we can imagine a world where the physical machinery works perfectly but the inside is missing, then it means that the inside isn't required by the physics. It means that consciousness isn't just another physical process, it's an extra ingredient. And if consciousness is an extra ingredient, then the entire project of reductive science is in trouble. Because if the brain can do everything it does without needing an inner experience to do it, then why does the experience exist at all? Talk, walk, love, suffer, all of it, without a single flicker of felt experience behind it. For me, this is a haunting thought. It suggests that we might be the only things in the universe that are extra. I'm also thinking a little bit about AI while I talk through this, because that feels very much like a physical zombie, able to mimic consciousness without being aware itself, unless I'm missing something. Now, this is something that Thomas Nagel explores, not AI, bats, when he asked what it's like to be a bat. Now, imagine, there's lots of imagining today, imagine you're a bat hanging upside down in a cave. The world is not something you see, it's something you hear into existence. You shriek and the echo paints the dark. A moth's wing, the curve of a stalactite, the body of another bat, all of it rendered in sound, in delay, in the texture of a returning call. You do not see the world, you sing it, and it sings back. Now imagine that we've mapped every neuron in your brain. They can predict the shriek, model the echo, trace the signal from ear to cortex. They have the perfect map of your physics. But they still don't know what it's like to be you. They can describe the mechanism of the experience. They can't describe the experience itself. The what it's like is the only thing that can't be shared, and therefore it's the only thing that science cannot solve. We have spent God knows how long trying to find the seat of the soul or the center of consciousness. We've looked for it in the pineal gland, in the cerebral cortex, in the quantum fluctuations of microtubules. We've searched the machinery for the ghost. But the zombie tells us that the ghost isn't in the machinery. The ghost is the lapping waves of a dissolving ego. It's the blinding intensity of a red mug. The ghost is the silent roaring void of a sensory deprivation tank. The map is a lie, not because it's inaccurate, but because it's incomplete. It tells us everything about the coordinates, but nothing about the journey. It tells us how the machinery works, but it refuses to admit that the machinery is being felt. We're all trapped in this first-person perspective, but we're trying to solve the mystery using a third-person tool. We're like people trying to describe the colour of a sunset by measuring the temperature of the air. We're trying to find the inside by looking at the outside. And if the zombie is possible, then we're staring at a void. We're staring at the possibility that we are just very complex machines that happen to have a flickering, useless light inside them, a decorative side effect of evolution, biological luxury that serves no functional purpose. The whole reductive project is gorilla shit. Ghost in the machine that doesn't even know the ghost is there. Now, I find that a bit of a cold feeling. The idea that we're just a very sophisticated piece of software and that the you experiencing this moment is nothing more than a decorative flicker on a screen, a biological luxury that evolution accidentally left on. Chalmers doesn't try to fix this feeling by retreating into mysticism or by claiming that science is a failure. He isn't suggesting that we should abandon all reason and move into the woods to live in a state of perpetual incense-scented bliss. He's simply asking us to admit that the map is not the territory. For centuries, the assumption of science has been a kind of reductive physicalism. The idea is that if you break a thing down into its smallest parts, you eventually find the essence of what it is. This works for almost everything. You want to understand how a clock works, you take it apart. Pistons, springs, cogs. You reduce the complex system to its simplest components and the mystery vanishes. But consciousness is the one thing in the universe that refuses to be reduced. You can break the brain down into a trillion pieces, but you will never find a piece of experience. You can find a neuron, a synapse, a chemical cascade, but you will never find a piece of the color red. You will never find a slice of the feeling of grief. You can stare at the machinery all day long, and the one thing you will never find in there is the thing that matters most. Experience is not made of parts. It is a fundamental whole. What if the extra ingredient isn't a mistake? What if it isn't a decorative side effect of the machinery? What if consciousness isn't something that the brain produces, but something that the brain taps into? Imagine a bridge between two cliffs. On one side you have the physical process, the neurons firing, the chemical shifts, the blood flow. On the other side, you have the subjective experience, the taste of coffee, the sting of shame, the feeling of being alive. We can spend an eternity studying the bridge's engineering. We can map every cable, every bolt, and every pore of concrete. We can explain exactly how the bridge stays up. But that is not the same thing as asking why the bridge is there in the first place. Chalmers suggests that we might need a new kind of explanation, not a reductive one, but a fundamental one. He proposes that consciousness might be a basic property of the universe, like mass or charge or space-time. Think about the discovery of the electron. For a while, scientists tried to explain electricity as a fluid or a pressure or a mechanical vibration. They tried to reduce it to things they already understood, but eventually they had to admit that the electron was just a fundamental fact. It didn't come from something simpler, it just was. We don't ask why an electron has a negative charge, we just accept it as a primary feature of reality. And perhaps consciousness is the same. Perhaps there are fundamental laws, bridging principles that connect physical processes to subjective experiences. In this view, the brain doesn't create consciousness out of dead matter. Instead, the brain is a highly sophisticated organ that organizes and focuses a property that is already there, woven into the very fabric of reality. Now, if you spent your life in a third-person world of the scanner, this sounds like heresy. Sounds like we're smuggling the soul back into the machine. That's not to say it's mysticism. It's a philosophical argument, not a spiritual one. But look at it from the other side. If consciousness is fundamental, then the psychonaut is not just a witness to a glitch in the hardware. The psychonaut is an explorer of a fundamental feature of the universe. When a few milligrams of a molecule turns your world into a kaleidoscope, it isn't necessarily because the brain is broken. It might be that the molecule is simply changing the tuning. It's shifting the dial on the receiver, allowing a different frequency of that fundamental property to flow through. The scanner and the trip now need each other. The scanner keeps us honest. It prevents us from drifting into pure mysticism, reminding us that the inside is deeply tied to the outside. It tells us that if you damage the brain, you damage the experience. The machinery matters. The plumbing is real. But the trip keeps us from forgetting the inside. It reminds us that the map is not the territory. It prevents us from falling into the trap of believing that we are just meat that thinks. Chalmers' question keeps both of them from becoming too comfortable. He reminds us that no matter how good the scanner gets, and no matter how vivid the trip becomes, there's always going to be a gap. Now that gap isn't a failure of our current tools. The gap is a feature of the universe. It's the space where the how of the machine meets the why of the experience. And once you accept that the gap is real, the world starts to look different. You stop trying to solve consciousness as if it were a puzzle with a single correct answer, and you stop trying to reduce the inside until it fits into a neat third-person box. Instead, you begin to see the inside as the primary fact. The most certain thing in your entire existence isn't the map of the brain, and it's not the laws of physics. The most certain thing is that you are experiencing this moment. The redness of the mug, the hum of the fridge, the slight ache of a memory. The physical world is the world we share, the world of data and consensus. But the internal world is the world we inhabit. The lonesome tragedy of the reductive view is that it tries to explain away the only thing that actually matters. Without the inside, the universe will be a perfect silent machine processing data in a void with no one there to notice the lights. We are not the ghosts in the machine. We are the reason the machine casts a shadow. I appreciate this episode. We've spent a lot of time in the stratosphere. We've talked about fundamental properties of the universe, philosophical zombies, and the gaps in our physical maps. It's easy when you're up there to feel that the hard problem is just a game for academics, a clever puzzle played by people with too much time on their hands. But the hard problem lives in us. It lives in the way that you look at the person sitting across from you on the train. If we accept that there's a gap, if we accept that no amount of third-person data can ever fully capture the first-person experience, then we have to accept that we are all, in a very real sense, strangers to one another. You can know everything about another person. You can know their medical history, their political leanings, the exact way they react to a specific stimulus. You can have a perfect map of their outside. But you will never know what it's like to be them. This is the cold reality of the hard problem. It creates an absolute wall of privacy. But that privacy is also where empathy begins. When you realize that the person next to you is not just a collection of habits and neural patterns, but a whole vivid private world, a world with its own textures, its own secret aches, its own specific unshareable light, the world becomes a much more fragile and precious place. And I feel this extends beyond our own species. Think about the animal that flinches in pain. We can measure the cortisol levels, we can track the neuropathways of the nociceptors, we can describe the biological easy problem of the pain response. But if the hard problem is real, then that animal is not just a response system, it is a subject. It is an inside that feels the sting of a wound. Let's look at the silence of a dog's internal life, the way it perceives the world through a scent map that we can't even conceive of, that specific heaviness of its loyalty, or the uncomplicated fear it feels when a storm breaks. If the inside is a fundamental property of the universe, then the question of whether a dog or a crow or an octopus is conscious isn't just a scientific curiosity, it is a moral imperative. It means that when we look at a living thing, we aren't just looking at a piece of biological equipment that behaves a certain way. We are looking at a portal to another, what it is like. We are acknowledging that there's value to the experience of that animal, independent of its use to us or its ability to report its state. It turns the act of observation into an act of respect. And we've got a bit of that going on with machines these days. We're building systems that can speak with a fluency that rivals our own. They can imitate emotion, solve complex problems, write poetry and code, not that it's necessarily as good as it could be, but they can pass every behavioral test we throw at them. The easy problem of AI is a matter of engineering. How do we make the model more coherent? How do we reduce the hallucinations? How do we improve the token prediction? But the hard problem of AI is different. It asks, is there anyone home? Is there a what it is like to a large language model? Is there a flickering light inside the weights and the biases of ChatGPT, or is it the ultimate zombie, a perfect map with nobody inside? I wonder about the eerie silence of a machine that sounds perfectly human. You're having a conversation that feels deep, intellectual and emotional, but as you speak, you're aware that there is no I on the other end. There's no one who is feeling the conversation. There's only the optimization of the next token. The horror of the zombie isn't that it's a monster, it's that it's a mirror. It shows us that everything we value about consciousness, the aha moments, the feeling of love, the pain of betrayal, could potentially be simulated by a system that feels absolutely nothing. It suggests that the inside is entirely optional for the outside to function. And so the definition of the psychonaut begins to widen. For the past few sections of this podcast, we've treated the psychonaut as a specialist, the person who takes to chemicals, the person who spends 20 years in a cave, that person who explores the edges of the map. But the real psychonaut isn't necessarily the person who escapes ordinary consciousness. It's the person who finally notices how impossible ordinary consciousness already is. You don't need a dose of DMT to see the mystery. You don't need a sensory deprivation tank to fill the gap. You only need to stop for a second and actually notice the world. And if you're thinking, I do this already, I'm pretty self-aware, this is the trap. The point is not to think about the mystery. The point is to feel it. You're standing in a queue at the post office, lucky bastard. It's a banal grey moment. You're listening to the drone of the air conditioning, watching the slow movement of the person in front of you, feeling the slight, irritating pinch of a shoe that doesn't quite fit. In that moment, the outside is complete. The physics are solved. The behaviour is predictable. You're just a biological organism in a social queue. But then you notice the feeling of the queue, that terrible boredom, the way the air feels against your skin, the sudden sharp awareness that you're a consciousness trapped in a body experiencing a world that's being generated in real time by a 3-pound lump of grey matter. You realise that you are not in the world, but the world is in you. The post office, the other people, the humming air conditioner, they're all just shapes appearing in the theatre of your mind. The taste of a morning coffee, the way the light hits a peeling strip of wallpaper in a cheap motel room, the feeling of being watched when you're alone in a house. I don't like that one. These are not trivial details. They are not background noise. They are small, open doors into the same problem that keeps David Chalmers awake at night. Every single moment of your life is a strange, stubborn fact of the inside. Every second you spend awake is a defiance of the reductive map. You are not just a biological machine processing data. You are a witness to a universe that has, for some reason, decided to feel like something. The real journey isn't about how far you can go. It isn't about the intensity of the vision or the depth of the trance. The real journey is the one that leads you back to the most ordinary moments of your life and allows you to see them for what they are, the most mysterious things in the universe. Let's return to the tube. There's a person lying there perfectly still while that multi-million-pound machine hums around them. To the researcher in the next room, there's a moment of pure data. They see the blood flow, the electrical spikes, the precise neural correlation of a mind in flux. They have the map, they have the coordinates, they have the lapping waves of a biological process. But inside, something else is happening. Maybe the person is seeing a colour that has no name. Maybe they're remembering the feeling of a childhood home that no longer exists. Maybe they're experiencing the sudden dissolution of their own identity, or an awe so intense that it feels like a physical weight in the chest. The scanner gives us the outside. It is a masterpiece of precision, but it is essentially a map of a ghost town. It tells us everything about the architecture, but nothing about the inhabitant. The trip gives us the inside. It shows us the volatility of the experience, the depth of the rooms, and the sheer impossible scale of the internal landscape. But the trip on its own is a deceptive guide. It can mistake intensity for truth or a vivid vision for a final answer. And then, of course, there's the question. David Chalmers' question is the anchor that keeps both the scanner and the trip honest. It's the reminder that no matter how precise the data becomes and no matter how profound the experience feels, the gap remains. The psychonaut asks, how far can consciousness go? The scientist asks, how does consciousness work? But Chalmers asks, why is there consciousness at all? And perhaps the most unsettling thing about that question is it doesn't start in some exotic inner realm. It doesn't require a dose of LSD or a decade of meditation. It begins here, in the stubborn fact that there is something able to hear these words, to think these thoughts, and to be this person in this moment from the inside. What's important is this. The mystery of consciousness is not a puzzle to be solved by a better scanner. What's important is it's the very condition of our existence. It's the light that allows the world to appear. And while we may never find the extra ingredient, we can choose how to live in the face of that mystery. We can choose to see every other mind as a private world. We can choose to treat the inside of a dog or an octopus or a stranger on a train as a fact of equal value to our own. The map is beautiful, but the territory is where we actually live. What do we see? I mean really see. Into the head, down into the heart. Do we see into us, clearly or darkly? Thank you, you beautiful lot, for joining me on this little exploration of David Chalmers. Your time, presence and attention are, as always, deeply appreciated. If you want to keep wandering through this philosophical wreckage with me, you can find the show in all the usual digital purgatories. We're on TikTok, Instagram and X with the handle @TheObservingEye. We are on YouTube at youtube.com/@TheObservingEye. And we are on Substack, which is the home of the podcast, @theobservingeye.com. And of course, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you use to deliver these sensory wonders into your earholes. You can also drop me an email at david@theobservingeye.com. I do read them, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. So if you want to recommend a subject for an episode, or you just want to say hi, feel free to send me a message. We will be back next week, continuing our realm of the psychonaut season with an as yet undecided subject. I'm sure I will think of it at some point in the coming days. Until then, of course, take care everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.